Greeting, friends. All summer long, Disciples Justice Ministries has been sharing a series of conversations between justice leaders under the theme Facing Brokenness, Being Brave Together. There are 4 conversations total, each one focusing on a particular topic: the church, our communities, the world, and creation. This conversation will be centered around creation. My name is Reverend Dr. Lori Pound-Fell, and in addition to being the founder of Disciples Public Presence and the senior pastor of First Christian Church, Minneapolis, I'm also the co-facilitator for the Disciples Justice Ministries cohort group, along with my friend and colleague, Reverend Brian Frederick Gray. This series of conversation comes out of work that we've been doing all year long, striving to address the dual threats of online radicalization and white nationalism. Those conversations started up in our group in late 2020, and following the attack on the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021, we redoubled our efforts. In this conversation, you'll be hearing our panelists reflect on where they see brokenness in creation, what can happen to bring about wholeness, and where they are finding hope right now. I'm excited for you to watch and hear tonight's conversation, as this conversation is a partnership between one of Green Chalice's partners, Blessed Tomorrow, who has a series called Let's Talk Climate. We are beyond thrilled that Blessed Tomorrow allowed us to be a part of their series. Many thanks to Annie Cruz, director of Blessed Tomorrow, and the staff for coordinating and recording this conversation. We're grateful for this partnership and look forward to other ways that we can work for justice together. Our panel includes Reverend David Bell, Mission Director of Yakama Christian Mission. He is also representing Reconciliation Ministries for the Christian Church and Disciples Center for Indigenous Ministries. The Reverend Carol Devine, Minister of Green Chalice, and Reverend Juan Rosario from Global Ministries. Make sure to stick around to the very end of the video, because we'll have a tangible takeaway that you can do to help make a difference in the world as we work to be brave together. We have had a Being Brave Together section at the end of each video in this series. On behalf of your siblings in faith at Disciples Justice Ministries, we welcome you to this conversation. And without further ado, let's get to that opening question. Carol, where do you see brokenness in creation, and what does this look like for you?
Oh, thank you, Lori, and thanks to the other panelists. It's an honor to be here. As probably many of you know, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with their most recent report just earlier this month. And while it was alarming, it was also the same message that they have been giving us for years, which is that humans are causing climate change, that the weather events, the severe weather events that we have been are experiencing right now will continue in frequency and in intensity. And most importantly, that there still is time and we still can make a difference if we act swiftly and strongly. And where I feel like all of us are seeing it is with the raging fires, not just in the US, but across the world, in the hurricanes, more frequent and more severe, the flooding that is happening in the Southeast right now. We're seeing it in the heat waves. I'm in Kentucky, and there have been several days already this summer and just this past week where we've had heat alerts. So I am seeing it, as we all are, all over the place. But personally, I've just been very aware in central Kentucky that I am so blessed to live in a neighborhood that has many old trees and a lot of shade, that I am blessed to have air conditioning in my home and a car that works and has air conditioning, that I work in a place that has air conditioning, that I have good health care, that I have access to good food. and that just 5 miles towards the center of the city where I live in Lexington, that is not the case. And so I see brokenness there as well. And to be honest, I've seen, I'm recognizing a lot of brokenness within the church, but particularly because that's our context with disciples of Christ, that some of our systems that are in place, service, churches, white churches, I'll say, that have more money and resources and more access to what specifically Green Chalice, but I would say all of our ministries offer. And so, in short, there's just a lot of brokenness, right? A lot of brokenness.
Juan, where do you see brokenness in creation, and what does it look like for you?
I think in my case, in Puerto Rico, we live in an island, so it's very easy to see all the signs of climate change. We have been seeing it for the last probably 3 decades, and they are so visible. For example, my wife's father and my wife's father lives in the coast, and they are losing their home. The sea is destroying the home because it's coming towards the house. There used to be like 100-meter piece of land of beach of sand in the back of the home, but now it's gone. It's gone. So we are losing all our beaches in the north part of the island in such a way and such a pace, so fast that we can see everywhere. We don't need to have the report from the United Nations. We see it every day. The seasons are changing in Puerto Rico. The precipitation patterns are changing in such a way that the east part of the island is drying up, and the west part of the island is receiving more rain. So everything in that sense related to rains are changing. But the really big wake-up call in brokenness, physical wake-up, was year 2017, when we have 3 huge hurricanes, one after the other. One in less than 2 weeks, in about 2 weeks, we have 3 major hurricanes passing near our island. We spare one, Jose spared the island. Irma passed north and destroyed some of our electrical system, but Maria went all the way through the island. And then everybody started talking about climate change, because we have a saying in Puerto Rico that we don't pray until we see the hurricane coming, until we see the storms. And the problem with our island is that our government is not doing enough to deal with that. I think that even churches are a little bit slow and late, in the sense that they are not having that. I think climate change should be in every single sermon, in every week in our country, and it's not happening. So we see a lot of things that we should be doing, and we are start doing, and the churches also start doing. I think there are some things happening, but climate change in our island is a matter of life and death. We don't have any other place to go. This is a very small island, densely populated.
Thank you, Juan. Dave, how would you answer the questions?
Yeah, so I would start with the part where Carol mentioned is smoke. Living in the midst of smoke for weeks now, and going through that is just recognizing that, at least out here in the West, is that the fires are phenomenal. What they're going through, the changing of weather patterns, as Juan talked to, it's just it's a different time, and you can look at that here in this particular landscape of the last 20 years, the changes that there are. Again, for personally here, it's we get rain every summer, and we've gone through a whole summer without any rain. Something's going on there. But I think that's critically tied to that and leads up to that is, for me, is looking around the world, and when we look at the extractive industries, especially in our indigenous communities, when we look at what's going on in Suriname and South Africa and the gold mining's there, and indigenous communities dealing with mercury, something that in the United States you wouldn't even consider. It's it's not just the running of water, but it's the killing of people, and it's the not living of future generations that come out of that. Here in the States, when we look at what's going on in Oak Flat with the San Carlos Apache and the idea of creating one of the largest copper mines, again, the destruction, when we look at that destruction of the earth, is that when we enter and dig into creation without giving a lot of thought of not only what's happening tomorrow, but what that means to creation itself. What's it mean to the soil? What does it mean to that landscape, the plants, the animals on it? I think that lays bottom line pieces of brokenness, of saying what we as a particular piece of creation is ignoring our siblings of creation, and thinking that somehow we have dominion over that we can dominate that, and because of that that we hurt ourselves. So the brokenness that plays out in the ways of that it moves from creation, when we think of the earth and the sun and the water, to what we've all experienced, right, with watching what happens with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, two individuals of creation, and that we can sit down and see what happens and see the brokenness that happens there, that all of that becomes tied together. And so that humanity gets hurt, as well as rabbits, as well as the water and the soil. And it's a brokenness that creation certainly wants to do something, and as a whole, to heal it. But this particular part of creation of humanity is being called to a new level of awareness that needs to happen now. So that's kind of where I see it right in this moment.
A new level of awareness and a new level of action, right? That not only do we need to recognize our dependence on creation, on each other, but we have to make changes in the way that we live, right? And the decisions that we make. And I think about, the quote that until all of us are free, none of us are free, and think about Christ's call for us to care for the least of these among us, and thinking about the least of these in terms of the marginalized and oppressed humans, and also thinking about the critters, the animals of the sea and of the land that are ignored, and thinking about those scenes of whales caught in, plastic, or sea turtles, and of animals, polar bears and others that are losing their land as well. And the Ecclesiastes calls us to know that we all have the same breath, and as animals suffer and die, so will we, that we have the same fate. Humans have the same fate as the animals. And just thinking about those connections, and being able to, as we see these things happen to our siblings, human siblings, and our creation siblings, we have to become aware, wake up, and act, right? Yeah, and Juan, when you were talking about the necessity of those in your country, of leaders, church leaders, government folks, to do something different, or that, you know, we don't start praying until we see the hurricane coming. I love that quote. I also wonder of how you and how you all are feeling in realizing that there is only so much that you all can do, and that in so many ways you're at the mercy of larger, more powerful places, not just the US, but the actions and inactions of others.
Yesterday, we were meeting with the president of the House of Representatives. We went there with no hope at all that we will be here. We were here, but we are going to work with that. But what we think is we need to do the work with the rank and file people, with the people, the grassroots. We need to talk with the people and the communities. And the very interesting thing is most of our organization in Puerto Rico that works with Global Ministries is a non-religious, not partisan NGO, and we work with common people. They are not activists, they are not especially educated, they are common people. And so we talk with them from the guts, in the sense that I come from the science. I am a health professional. I do a lot of work with the numbers and the hard data, the hard numbers. But we know that this is not going to be fixed by science. There is a profound spiritual aspect of the whole thing that need to be addressed if we want to move forward on this thing. If we want to survive, we need to think more than numbers. We need to think more than even living things. Creation is not only the living things. Even the non-living things are part of creation. We need air, which is supposedly elements and a compound of elements. We need the rocks. We need everything. So creation is about everything. And so we need to respect that. We need to put ourselves in a position in which there is even one doctrine that it's one narrative about us being like stewards of nature. I don't even think we even qualify to be stewards. Yes. I think we all have to be servants. That's all we should be, servants. We should obey. And nature is the creation. And we should obey its law. We should be able to deal within its limits. And that's very hard narrative, because it's with that comes a lot of responsibility. But it's a call to know, a call to learn, a call to understand, to deep understand. For example, whenever I hear all people talking about in the Bible of all the ecological quotes, I have never heard anyone talking about what I think is the most ecological quote in the Bible, which is Jesus talking about, don't worry about what you are going to eat or dress. I mean, keep your desires out of this. Keep yourself, don't think you are going to create a new world with your desires. You need to obey the principles. You need to be a servant. You need to be humble. And in that sense, the work we do a lot of work with things that are really in people's interest. We work with renewable energy because some people were 1 year without energy after Hurricane Maria. 1 year is the longest blackout in the United States. Is a second biggest blackout in history of humanity. And people are interested in having that, but we use that to leverage another discussion at the political realm and also the spiritual realm. Let's talk about what is our place on this earth. We are not the masters. We are not the masters.
Yes, amen and amen.
Yeah. And Juan, you have taken us beautifully into the beginning of our second question. How do you work toward wholeness? I want to thank all three of you for recognizing and bringing to the forefront that brokenness in creation, we're not just talking about a tree. We're talking about, as Juan said, every living, creature, every what we would consider maybe a non-living creature, which is living in some way, right? Every element of earth here. And so I appreciate you bringing that forward. That's important for people to understand when we talk about brokenness of creation. It affects every single part of our being here on earth and above. So now that we've described where you see brokenness in creation and what it looks like for you, and Juan took us into how do you work toward the wholeness of creation. Juan, I'm going to come back to you to see if you have more to add about how do you work toward the wholeness of creation?
Well, we are having very, very difficult conversations. Some are so difficult that some people don't want to have it. And one of that conversation is related to the fact that we are, for example, we are an overpopulated island. That's a bad word in most of, even in Christianity, bad, overpopulated sounds like Malthusian or something like that. But we live in an island, and we live because we are using resources of other people's places.
That's right.
We import 90% of the things we eat. And when you go to the places where we receive those foods from, we see that some people are starving down there. I remember going to Nicaragua in 1995 and seeing children being buried in common graves because the cash crops where the prices were so low that they couldn't afford to sell and have enough. But the other thing was that most of the land of those countries were devoted to create cash crops for other people. And in our country, if we want to talk about really addressing wholeness and being humble, we need to talk about overconsumption. We need to talk about the fact that we do overconsume a lot of things that other people need. So that conversation is not an easy conversation in our country. We are having that discussion. We are making a proposal to create with the evangelical seminar. We haven't presented it yet. We have preliminary work to create something like an institute of sustainability, a Christian Institute of Sustainability, and doing the hard numbers. I think we are the only group in Puerto Rico that does a calculation of ecological footprint that it's scary, the amount of overshoot in our country. I mean, so we use huge amount of resources that are not in our country, and that has a consequences. So now we have that conversation with some of the churches, and it's interesting how some of the pastors come back and say, wow, I'm now I cannot go to the restaurant without thinking about where does my food comes from, who was hurt by growing my. So the creation is thinking even abroad, is thinking about the other people, is thinking about the injustices happening 1,000, 2,000 miles away because of the way I live, the way I decided to live. In that sense, I think we are in a process of recreating our human nature in the groups we work with. We need to change the way we think about our relation to nature.
Thank you. Dave, how do you work toward the wholeness of creation?
Yeah, I thought the question was a great question.
Okay.
Part of it, Lori, is because I don't think I work towards wholeness. In my head is that creation is whole. And so I think that I'm willing to talk about brokenness of creation, but creation is creation, the fullness of creation. I want to say that my work is more towards harmony. How do we come back together, not balance, but harmony? How do we see ourselves as full again? And I think part of that is what Juan was talking about. The consumption. It's working like how do we consume? One of those things being, where does our food come from? And when we do that, then I think we start thinking about what was alluded to before is life. What is life and what is death? And so then it becomes important to me on how animals are treated, how plants are treated, how plants are grown. So if it's just in the one little small area of what I eat is going, that I literally can't live without something dying, whether I'm a meat eater, I'm a vegetarian or a vegan, that I can't plant plants without destroying animals, without destroying soil, that all of that matters. And when I can do that, if I can start doing that just with what I eat, then I have to give thought to, how do I get my power? What does it mean for hydroelectric dams? What does it mean? What are the questions that we're not asking in our wind production, in our solar production today? Of going to be able to look at the folks who came before us and go, hydroelectric seemed like the best thing in the world because it was renewable. It was a renewable resource. We didn't give thought to what happened to the fish, to the salmon, to the steelhead in our area. And so it causes me to go, okay, so 100 years from now, 50 years from now, what are folks going to be looking at when I'm out here saying, let's get more solar, let's get more wind? What does that mean for tomorrow? And not saying not to go down there, but to ask new questions, to keep the questions in front of us as we move along, because I think it becomes important to who we are, especially within the church. Because we're in that one unique place of an institution that is given, or at least folks see that has a moral authority. And so then it pushes me as an individual to take that idea and to go, there has to be action. The idea that the charitable stuff has to be done so individuals and animals and plants and trees can live. But where's the action? Where do I become actionable? And more importantly, where do I call my institution into action? So it must use the moral authority that it has been given, at least by the folks within that organization, to use that and to say, we have to act. Something has to happen today.
Reverend Scott Hardenary, my partner in Green Chalice ministry, has said for years what Juan just said a little bit ago, which is that this is a problem of the spirit, that climate crisis is a spiritual problem, as are all the big problems, which is why faith leaders and all of us are ministers of Christ, no matter if we're ordained or not. So faith leaders are the best poised to do this, right? God told Job, look to the animals, look to creation for answers. And both what Dave said and what Juan said about the need for us to have action and to lead is that we understand as people of faith that we aren't here for our own benefit, right? We aren't here for our own purposes, but for God's purposes. And that we are called by Christ to care for the least of these, that we're called to love our neighbors as ourselves, and that our neighbors are defined by the least of these among us, but not only that, by whoever we would consider our enemies, so that all of creation and all of humanity are our neighbors, which calls us to be bold in what David was saying and what Juan was saying. We have to be bold with our actions and feel empowered by Christ to act on this most important issue of our lifetime for sure, but possibly human history, that we can make a difference, but only if we are strong in our actions, bold in our actions, bold in our words, kind, always, loving, always, but without fear. to do these things together, to join our hands, to work with our ecumenical brothers and sisters, our interfaith and siblings, our siblings of no faith, that we join hands and work with all people, scientists and those who are people of faith, that only together, by doing all of this and being bold and brave, will this work. But I am so inspired by all of the work that is happening in our denomination. And there already are churches who are carbon neutral, and Green Chalice, co-authored a resolution in 2017 calling for our denomination to go carbon neutral by 2030. And when it passed, I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like, how are we going to do this? Like, it just seems so insurmountable. And yet, we already have congregations that are carbon neutral, and many others who are working toward that, and individual disciples who are carbon neutral in their own lives, and others who are joining and working towards that. So I see that that our work, our grassroots work, as Juan said, which is what Green Chalice is grassroots work, but also partnering and encouraging and yelling at even our leaders to do better, right? And holding them accountable, voting for the earth. It is what we're called to do as people of faith. And the thing that's really beautiful is that when we start taking these actions, like Dave said, when our eating and how do we get our electricity, and speaking up and marching and writing and all of the things, as we do these things, we actually, it's a practice, a Christian practice. And then as we do this and then this and then this, it becomes easier to do more. And then we become empowered in our faith, and we can feel truly like we are living out our faith, rather than sitting back and being victims and watching the fires, the floods, the hurricanes, as if we don't have any power in it, right? So by taking action and doing these various things, we are empowered. So sorry, I kind of got excited there, Lori, sorry.
That's good, that's good.
Yeah. Dave or Juan, do you have any follow-up to what Carol said, or follow-up to what Dave or Juan have said?
I just want to make a comment. It's about giving thanks for being invited to this beautiful conversation, and the thing of people talking about harmony, but also about bravery in pushing the thing and making our politicians accountable for that. We need to be more loud, in the sense that we need to be more prophetic. I always say in the churches, I know I'm not part of any church in Puerto Rico, but I do pass a lot of time in all temples in Puerto Rico. And most of the time we talk about, we need to stop with the pink ministries and start being more prophetic. We need to talk about what's the important things are, and we need to talk loud.
Yes.
We need to become like Christ.
Right. And I think it's all been said. It's, in many ways, the trick is going about and being engaged. And in the large question for many of us is, how do we help our siblings become engaged? It's that there's certainly, we know from many of us, those folks who are around us are engaged alongside of us, but it's the millions and millions out there that are both within the church and without the church, of how do we start having those conversations? How is our everyday conversation enter into this call, and how do we develop that, and how do we get folks engaged in such a way to understand that this simply isn't about them. It's that our friends and neighbors, our siblings who are alive right now, is, look, to be able to be honest and go, death is death, and you are going to die. But this is about our children's children, and whether or not they're going to live. And I think that becomes the bigger piece of getting folks is all your great grandchildren already dead? Because they're never going to get a chance to even be here because of what we do today. How do we bring that up? How do we have that as our common conversation on a daily basis, and where we are, you know, without doing it in such a way that is such a downer, right? That folks just quit listening. And I think that's part of the struggle of working towards to work towards harmony, to work towards wholeness, is for myself is how do I create a new dialogue that I can have with my neighbors who just don't see this as critically as I do.
Stick around, Dave, for our call to action.
Right. I really appreciate the use of the word harmony, and the use of that we need to be saying that we need to be prophetic. Because some people would say harmony and being prophetic can't align, but I believe that we get to that harmony by being prophetic, which the three of you are doing in such a beautiful way. I want to move us to our next question, and it's about hope. And I'm excited to hear your answers, because in the answers of the conversation that you've already had, you have touched on that brokenness, as we see it in creation, goes beyond, as I said, just somebody's cutting down a tree that we need, right? Dave mentioned the murder of Mr. George Floyd here in Minneapolis, that the brokenness in creation was very vivid that day. And it wasn't just to humans, it was to all of creation. When you think of all of the incidences we've had of death due to systemic white supremacy over just the past 18 months, let's say, we can go back many years, right? But let's just even over the past 18 months or so, sometimes it's hard to see hope. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to see it. So I'm going to ask you in your next conversation to talk about where you see, what is your hope and where do you see it? So Dave.
Yes. My hope does lie in creation. I think that creation is forever there trying to teach us and asking us to be part of the teachers of creation. And that's to say that I know it's my hope more than anything lies in the ancestors, is that for me, it's an understanding that those who were around yesterday and those who are around tomorrow, the ancestors of yesterday, the ancestors tomorrow, are in our midst now. And we have to learn how to listen better. That my hope lies in, those ancient stories, right? And for Christians and Hebrews, we've got our own, it lies in the dirt and lies in the water. That Juan talking about science, that science piece earlier, is we know we're no more than dirt and water. The ancient people knew that, whether it's the Genesis text or whether it's the creation story of the Hopis or the creation stories out of China, is we're no more than dirt and water. And recognizing that is to know that being the case, as our ancestors are alive in us now, those who have been and those who will come, and more so is each of our ancestors, the multiplicity of our ancestors, that water of who they were is what we drink on a daily basis. I believe that when we start listening closer and deeper to our bodies and to the words of our neighbors and to the water that flows on a daily basis, the wind that blows, I think the answers are there, but we have to develop new skills that instead of that there's the truth that there is life in the air, and that there's different stories being told. I know it just seems a little weird, a little oddball, but here's what I'm trying to say is we're going in the fall here, and the corn will be turning soon and turning brown, and the wind will come. And there is something about in the fall, in the late fall, as the corn, the last bit of the green is in the corn, it's really dry, the wind comes through, and you can stand in these cornfields and listening to the rustle in the slightest of the breeze. It is in that combination of the corn and the wind that we can listen to the death song of the corn as it dies, but it's only given to us in combination with the wind. There's something that's going on there that we have lost, that our ancestors knew intimately because of their tie to creation was just deeper than ours, than me when I'm sitting inside my house or when I'm sitting inside my car. To be out in the midst of the ground and the wind, there's something going on there that our ancestors are telling us. And I think that's where the hope lies for me. It lies in that the very midst of creation. And understand me that when I say this, as I'm not saying that we can't do that in our homes. Those trees that gave their life to build our homes. If you're in a place of trees, right? You may be in a place of dirt. That there is a voice there, but it's a voice that takes a different way of listening that we've been taught in this world, especially for us in the United States. Not to listen. Do not listen to the animals. Don't listen to the plants. Don't listen to, like Juan said, the rocks. Don't imagine listening that, because if you do that, you can no longer be an extractive industry. Extractive industries, you can't be a part of profit, you can't be a part of power, because that calls you to be a part of creation. Mm-hmm. That's where my hope lies, is right smack in the midst of creation.
Thank you, Dave. I want to be conscious of our time, so I'm going to move on to Carol. What is your hope, and where do you see hope?
Well, when Green Chalice started in 2007, just in the state of Kentucky, it was just the passion of the hearts of a bunch of Kentucky disciples. And in 2011, it went denomination-wide. And when in 2011, people would contact me asking about, is it even possible for a church to get solar, and how does that work? And very few churches in all of the US had solar in 2011. But now in 2021, 10 years later, so many churches, including disciples churches, have solar energy. Many disciples, I don't know the numbers, but are now very aware of Green Chalice and the work that we do, and our call as disciples of Christ, as followers of Christ, to care for creation and to live differently. And I'll even point back to just this pandemic, when we were in total shutdown globally for months last year, that there were reports of birds that hadn't been seen, and animals coming out, and the air in China that you could see unlike anybody had ever remembered seeing, right? So the air was clearing up, the water was clearing up, the animals were coming out like, what? So even though obviously the pandemic has been a horrific and horrible thing, there is always learning from all of our experiences and from all of our brokenness, right? And that was a huge learning for us. And the other thing out of the pandemic is that we know that we can change our behavior very quickly, right? And very strongly. And when we were told it was a matter of life or death, and we needed to stay in our homes and to wear masks and those kinds of things, we did. We did, because it was a matter of life and death. So we can change very quickly, and people of faith are leading. And I'm so thankful for the Ministry of Green Chalice and for all those who are involved in it, and our partners at Blessed Tomorrow who have conversations like this all the time and are giving us more and more resources and encouraging us, but not only giving us the resources, but also telling us those stories of hope and pointing us to the places and the people who are leading on climate. So, and I have hope in the children who don't have to be taught in the same way that some of us my age have to be taught. They get it. So I have a lot of hope in them.
Thank you, Carol. Juan, you get to leave us with your words of hope, where you see it, and what your hope is.
Let me be very clear. I was grown up by women. I live in a house where the women were the masters, in the sense that my grandmother, I used to say, she was so big that she couldn't be put into a grave, too big to be put into any grave. So we will never bury you. We are going to harvest you. You are going to grow after you are dying. You remember, she always talking to me about not crying for the things I cannot change. You cannot change them. No, just keep going. Do whatever. And if you can change it, do it. Don't cry, do it. And I remember she always saying me, knock at the door. If they don't open, keep walking and knocking at other doors, because someone will open. Sometimes someone will open. So I spent all my life doing things that people say that's impossible. That's impossible. And things that were very long-headed. I mean, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. And some of the things I have never yet get to. But I was grown up with that sense that you never lose hope. That hope is not about what's outside you. Hope is about what you have inside, and what you know that it's going to come, like Paul used to say, the things that haven't happened yet. So, and after that, I remember the people asked me about how can I keep going and being optimistic. And I said, I'm too coward to commit suicide. I wouldn't do that. And I cannot live without hope, because I will commit suicide. I cannot do that. But then after that, I had an experience that changed my life. There is a scientific that said, like 10 years ago, I don't remember his name. He said, if we do the right things, we may keep humanity on the earth for many, many more years. Mm. If we don't do the right things quickly, our sons and daughters will have a miserable life, but our granddaughters and grandsons will have no life. So that's how he said that about 10 years ago. And then I had a granddaughter that one day asked me, because she knew that I work in the environmental stuff, and she heard all the very strong stories about what was happening with pollution and all those things, and water and climate change and everything. And one day, she was like 6 years old. She asked me, Grandpa, when I grow up, will Puerto Rico exist? Will I have a country? And then I said, now hope is not only about things outside. Now hope is about a duty. It's about things that we need to do. And we are going to do it. And outside, it will happen. And it will happen because we need to have the faith to make it happen. So every day, I wake up to a new things that some said that wouldn't happen, like you said about going solar. So we are working now in 9 different municipalities with groups, and they are deploying the system themselves. They are learning themselves. They are doing the whole thing themselves. I hope that together with the change in the solo stop, we start changing our minds and our heart. It's about metanoia. It's about repenting. It's about changing the way we see the other, we see the world. And although, again, I'm not a Christian in the sense that I don't belong to a church, I always think that the most beautiful message I have ever heard came from a man called Christ saying, do it. And you just start, complaining and everything. Do it. You have the power to do it. And we have the power to do it.
Yes, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Juan. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Carol. Your conversation has been not only enlightening, educational, but inspiring. And I appreciate it so very much. And it's been a blessing. And speaking of blessings, a big thank you again to Blessed Tomorrow for allowing us this space. Next up, you will hear Carol sharing a way that we can be brave together. So I hope you will stick around.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm so excited to be able to share a few things with you all as we are brave together and taking action. The biggest one is that on Saturday, September 25th, from 11 to 3, we have a climate ambassador training. This is an ecumenical offering to disciples, and then to all of our faith and non-faith partners, to be honest. We would love for you to join Reverend Scott Hardinieri and myself and the folks at Blessed Tomorrow to learn how to be brave and speak on climate. A lot of times what folks are saying to me is that they don't feel confident to be able to talk about this subject, and we will give you the tools that you need for that. It's an incredible program. Please find out more and register at greenchalice.org. The other thing that I alluded to, or didn't allude to, that I talked about is that in 2017, we had a resolution that was passed with Disciples of Christ, and that was calling our denomination to go carbon neutral by 2030. And so we encourage everyone, all denominations, but particularly for our purposes, Disciples of Christ, congregations, and individuals, to look at what does that mean. And you can learn more at greenchalice.org, and you can always reach out to me or Scott to have conversation to learn more. Also, we encourage everyone to sign up for our monthly newsletter, which is Green Chalice News, which you can do that again at our website, greenchalice.org. But also, Blessed Tomorrow has so many resources and information about this work. And you can find videos, you can find past conversations like these with other faith leaders, and so many resources, even resources on how to go carbon neutral. And so I encourage you to visit blessedtomorrow.org. And then finally, please just reach out to me or to Scott to partner to have conversations. We also are willing to do workshops and conversations with your congregations and your regions. And you can find us through our website, greenchalice.org. Thank you.